The third day of the explosive sex trafficking trial of fallen music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, and it delivered even more bombshell revelations as one of the government's key witnesses, Casandra Ventura, better known as Cassie, Diddy's former girlfriend and protege, remained on the witness stand. She detailed years of alleged abuse, coercion, and the dark reality behind the so-called freak-off parties, and visual evidence is being shown to jurors. How did Diddy react to testimony in court today? What were the emotions of the courtroom? And what could a cross-examination of Cassie look like? Welcome to this special edition of Sidebar presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart in for Jesse Weber. We know what's being reported on from the outside, but to help us get an inside look at everything that is happening inside the courtroom in the Southern District of New York, I want to bring in our Law&Crime reporter, Elizabeth Millner, who was in the courtroom once again today. Elizabeth, thanks for taking time as court just wrapped. Just first up, what was the mood in there today, day two of Cassie being on the stand?
Well, definitely the mood was just, again, kind of like it was for day one of Cassie's testimony. A lot of people were anticipating what is going to happen today, what more is our prosecutors going to go over with Cassie. And really today was just kind of a summation of her entire 11-year relationship with Diddy, who she refers to as Sean whenever she's testifying. But as far as today, the mood kind of, it was a little different inside that courtroom. It was, part two of her direct examination. We thought that there would be a point where we would get to the cross-examination at some point today. That's not happening. It's going to be happening first thing tomorrow morning. But as far as just the mood in general, Cassie comes in today. She's wearing a long gray dress. She did something similar that she did yesterday where she just walked directly to the witness stand. Her family was there to support her. Those family members included her mother, her brother, and her husband, Alex Fine. Meanwhile, on the other side of the courtroom, you have Diddy's children. Now, it was a little different than it was yesterday in that his daughters weren't present. And I was actually told by a source that they weren't present for a reason that, it's a reason for a lot of kids. They were there for graduation. They have prom coming up. And so that is why they are not in the courtroom. And that is why they're no longer in the city, actually, because they're flying back home to attend to those types of activities. But so for the most part, those who were there to support Diddy today were one of his associates, his sons. That included Quincy Brown, that included Justin Combs, it included Christian Combs as well as Diddy's own mother, Janice Combs, who was inside that courtroom. So really you had on one side Diddy's family, you had on the other side Cassie's family, who was accompanied by Cassie's attorney as well too. And so that was kind of the mood that was set today. Now, even when Cassie had walked inside that courtroom, Diddy, for the most part, from what I saw, kept his eyes on her. Saw her when she had first entered the courtroom, saw her as she walked up to the witness stand. Meanwhile, Cassie, from what I could see of her, didn't really pay much mind to the defendant or the defendant's family. Again, she just made kind of a beeline to the witness stand. And again, she was back under oath. And so, for the most part, she definitely kept her composure. There were emotional points throughout her testimony, and I'm sure we'll talk about more in depth in just a second. But for the most part, that was just the general mood of the court, thinking that we were going to get to the cross, but it was still another day of direct examination. And at this point, it seems that Cassie won't even be off the stand until the end of the week.
I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring Sidebar. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that offers you a range of applications. One of my favorite Odoo applications is their sales tool, the Kanban pipeline game changer. Whether you're working with leads or full-blown opportunities, you can visually track every stage of your sales process. Just drag and drop to move deals forward. It is fast and honestly kind of satisfying. And when it's time to send a quote, it's literally a couple of clicks. And the reporting, super clear. You can get a live view of your pipeline, conversions, and what's working so you can focus on closing, not guessing. So right now, you can get a free 15-day trial of Odoo's all-in-one business solution and see how it can make your life easier. Check it out at odoo.com/sidebarcrm. Now, before we get to that testimony involving Cassie today, Elizabeth, I understand there was a little bit of some drama between the prosecution and the defense. What happened?
So there were actually arguments outside the presence of the jury before the testimony restarted this morning. So even outside of the presence of the jury, Cassie is not on the witness stand. Her family wasn't in the courtroom when these arguments were happening. But essentially, from the defense's point of view, they wanted no communication between Cassie and her attorney whenever she would be under cross-examined witnesses to do. So essentially, the defense, from their point of view, said that it's not an issue about emotional support, whereas the government, in their argument, was saying that the witness should be able to kind of consult with her attorney, under the assertion of privilege. A lot of legal jargon, a lot of legalese there. But from the defense's perspective, they were just concerned about Cassie and her lawyer being able to consult with one another on the testimony, and kind of how that would even happen is, she is a government witness. They were concerned that the government would tell Cassie's lawyer something. Cassie's lawyer would refer it to them while she's under cross-examination. And so they were just a little worried about that. Now, as from the government standpoint, and Maureen Comey was making this argument today, she essentially said, whenever she is talking with the attorneys of the prospective witnesses, that they're really just kind of talking about logistics. They're not talking about testimony. They're talking about transportation. They're talking about security. They're talking about, when Cassie presumably can leave the courtroom, who will follow her out of the courtroom, security and logistics. And so those were one portion of the arguments. Another big argument that was made this morning prior to Cassie restarting her testimony were just marked exhibits from the defense. From the government's point of view, they said that the defense was not producing their new exhibits. They thought that these exhibits would be shared all the way back in April, which was just a few weeks ago, and said that their goal is not trial by ambush. Whereas the defense says, they are marking a tremendous amount of exhibits, some of these exhibits even, in the government's possession. And so these the category about these exhibits were pretty much text messages between Sean Combs and Cassie. And the defense was saying it was pretty much unfair if the government can prepare a witness with these text messages. They said, marking exhibits in response to direct testimony, they can hand over the exhibits essentially around the time cross-examination starts, whereas the government was making the point that they wanted these exhibits now. They wanted them pretty much ASAP. Again, them pointing back to the fact that these had to be turned in by April, and we're already in trial right now. We're in testimony right now. And even from the judge's response, he was kind of a little like, why are you just bringing this up now while we're in trial? If this was an issue and you didn't have them before the start of trial, why didn't you raise that issue before? And then we could have handled it in this matter, so that way we're not holding up the jury. And so that way we can get the day started. So that took about a good 30 minutes of just back and forth between, the defense and the government. And essentially the conclusion was just that these exhibits would be turned in around the cross-examination time. So a time that the government could soon be getting these exhibits, so that way they can mark it, possibly re-ask these types of questions under redirect. And that's why, this testimony is taking a little bit of time, because there's just so much intricate pieces, from both sides that, they just want to make sure, again, all their ducks are in a row for the most part. But it seems like from the defense's point of view, they'll hand over the exhibits, just not when the government initially wanted to.
And another person involved with Casandra Ventura, Alex Fine, who's her husband, father of her children. And first off, you just think of what it must be like for him listening to the testimony that we'll talk about in just a moment of what his wife is saying on the stand about her relationship with Sean Diddy Combs. But what possibility is there that Alex Fine could actually testify at this trial?
From the defense's perspective, it seems like it was kind of a strong possibility. And I say the defense because the defense plans to call him as a witness to kind of impeach his own wife's testimony, which is something that you don't really see every day. So this argument was first brought up just yesterday. And essentially this kind of was about the time frame around, 2018 time. So essentially from the defense's perspective, these arguments were brought up yesterday, and this was just about the testimony that was going to be brought in, something that was even talked about today, and this was about an alleged rape that happened in 2018. And essentially from their point of view, they were saying that Alex Fine allegedly threatened Diddy for the most part. They said that that Alex Fine threatened Diddy about Cassie demanding this $30 million, threatened to beat the F out of Diddy. Those were the words that were used in court yesterday. And the defense says that they want to call Alex Fine as an impeachment witness. And the government said, for the most part, that he should be allowed inside that courtroom while his wife is testifying, while his wife is there on the stand to provide emotional support. And I will even say, sitting just a few rows back from him, you could kind of feel the tension just between him and Sean Combs, not from Sean Combs' perspective, but more so from Alex Fine to Sean Combs, where he looked visibly upset, in my opinion. He looked like, that he was just, reliving this testimony and going through this testimony in extreme graphic detail. It just seemed like he was very upset of, why did you do this to my wife? This is somebody that I love and I want to protect her. It definitely seemed like it was kind of a protection mechanism, or maybe it was just, his, natural reaction. But you could kind of feel just during some of that testimony today that there were some tense moments. But back to these arguments outside of the presence of the jury that happened yesterday. So the defense says, they wanted to exclude him and get him outside of the courtroom when this alleged rape was in 2018. It was talked about during her testimony. So for the most part, during the duration of her being on the witness stand, he did stay in that courtroom, as well as her brother, as well as her mother, and her attorney as well too. But then when it came to this testimony about the 2018 party that had happened at Cassie's brother's house, and then we're talking about the alleged rape that had happened also in that same year. And that's a big year too, because that was the year that Cassie called it off with Diddy, as she had said. But so when they were starting to get into that 2018 time frame, I did see Alex get up out of the courtroom, walk out of the doors, and he didn't come back for the rest of her testimony, mainly because of these arguments that happened outside of the presence of the jury yesterday.
I know how emotional it was yesterday in the courtroom for day one of Cassie's testimony. What more did we learn in day two of Casandra Ventura on the stand being questioned by prosecutors?
Well, we learned a lot, Chris, and I say that because I used up pretty much half of this notepad just taking notes of pretty much, 7 hours of testimony today. And so when Cassie was brought back onto the stand, she was handed over 2 drives. These drives had messages, photos from her devices. Even one of these devices had enhanced images, more photos, more messages. Then they started kind of talking about her aliases that she had used when she was either booking escorts or booking hotel rooms, such as Jackie Star, such as Veronica Bang, such as Mia Crawford. Then, they kind of touched base a little bit about Suge Knight. Why was Suge Knight brought into this testimony today? Mainly because there was a point where she had said, she being Cassie, had said that Diddy security guards and Diddy himself packed up some guns from a safe and tried to find Suge Knight, who apparently was just down the hill from them. So that was the first start of it. Then they had touched base about, the escorts and confirming that they weren't police officers or cops. And Cassie would essentially lead, with the fact that she wasn't a cop to make the escorts feel more comfortable. And she said that Diddy had told her to essentially say that. A big point of her testimony initially this morning was just about the Intercontinental Hotel surveillance video and, the whole fighting back and the concept of why she didn't fight back in this particular incident. So she said that she fought back early in their relationship, but she said it was worse for herself when she did fight back. She said that when she did fight back, that Diddy would be actually surprised that she would fight back. They were shown the surveillance video from the Intercontinental Hotel again, that from 2016. We were seeing it again. The prosecution asked her what Sean Combs was holding in his hand. She said nothing at first. Then there's a point where he kind of goes off camera, but you can see him through the reflection of the surveillance video, because initially we just thought that was a portion of the hallway, when really it was a mirror showing the reflection of what was really kind of happening. And so he had grabbed her phone. He had walked towards the room where there was actually an escort waiting, because they were leaving a freak off, or that she was actually leaving a freak off. And that's why Diddy had run outside of that hotel room with a towel on. You see Diddy through this mirror reflection throwing a vase at her. She said she didn't get hit by this vase. It just hit a wall instead. And she says she can't necessarily recall the exact words he was saying to her when he had thrown the vase at her, when he he was essentially viciously beating her in this hotel. And I will say this about Cassie's testimony today. If there was something that she didn't remember, she just flat out said that. She didn't try to, make up words or try to put words necessarily in his mouth, from what I could tell under her direct examination. But, she says she didn't remember what he had said to her during this time. You could see her picking up a hotel phone to call somebody downstairs. Then next thing you know, she's putting her arms up to keep him away from her. There was a point where we saw that security video of Officer Israel Flores, who now works for the LAPD, but at the time he was working security for the hotel. You see him back inside the surveillance video. You see Cassie walk to the opposite side away from the hotel room that they were in. You see Diddy walking towards that hotel room. And then she is seen walking back towards that hotel room, not because she wanted to go back to this freak off or anything like that from her testimony today. It was essentially because she just wanted to get her stuff so she could leave. And she said that Diddy didn't want her to leave. He wanted her to stay, but she did leave. She went back to her apartment. She ended up taking an Uber. Then we saw some text exhibits for example, these were the texts from Diddy, who in these text messages was going by Pop Pop. And again, that was a name that he liked her to call him, and this was actually a nickname she even gave her grandfather. This is something we had learned yesterday. So these text messages said from Diddy to Cassie, "Call me." He also said, "Yo, please call me. I got 6 kids. Please call me. Yo, please, I'm surrounded. Call me, my kids. Help." And then Cassie said, "Put a robe on," and that was because he was running around in a towel, something we had all saw through this surveillance video. Diddy's texting her back, call me now." Cassie said, "I went and checked everything. As long as you don't disturb the guests, you're good." The guests being the other ones in the hotel room. And then we had learned who this mysterious escort was who was inside that hotel room, and it was this man named Jules, somebody that they used often during these freak-offs. He was an escort, and he was somebody that we saw an exhibit photo of him. He is a light-skinned man. He appears muscular, couldn't really tell necessarily. He has a bald head. And then she says she doesn't remember the conversation she had with Jules specifically after this incident had happened until actually another freak off. And so we saw another exhibit photo, this of Cassie. She's wearing sunglasses. It's a selfie photo, and it's a selfie photo of her with a busted lip, or a fat lip as she had called it in court today. And this was taken actually in the Uber after she had left the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles. She had a black eye as well. I mentioned the sunglasses. The sunglasses were covering the black eye, but you could see the black eye just peeking out through the sunglasses. Meanwhile, at this point, Diddy's still text messaging her saying, call me now, call me, the cops are here, you're going to abandon me now." And Cassie says she wasn't aware the cops even came to the hotel. She had responded, "I have a premiere Monday," and I'm kind of paraphrasing here because it was a lot of messages going back and forth, so I had to make sure I had to write everything down. She said, "You are sick for thinking it's okay what you've done." And she said, "Stay away from me." He said, he being Diddy, responded, "Call me, I'm about to be arrested. If you don't pick up, you'll never hear my voice again. Please, I'm getting arrested." And then Cassie responded, "Plugging my phone in and going to bed. You should do the same." Kind of, and for the most part, insinuating that he might have been telling a story or just using this to over exaggerate. And she had brought up another person who the government has said might be a witness in this case, and that being Kaye Morgan, somebody that Cassie was friends with for a number of years, 17 years according to her testimony. And she had said that her best friend at the time, Kaye Morgan, was upset after seeing Cassie's black eye. She was at her home. She saw this black eye before. She had known that Diddy was physically abusive towards her before, and Kaye was actually somebody who had called the cops on Cassie's behalf. Cassie said once the cops did arrive and spoke to her, she didn't say who did this to her, did this by being physically violent, I mean. She said she wouldn't disclose it because she still wanted to protect him. And Chris, I just got to point out here, I think there's a lot of always conversation about why do people stay in these abusive relationships? Why do people keep going back? Why do people return? And just hearing Cassie's testimony from her own mouth today, from her own words, just hearing her tone, because throughout most of her testimony yesterday and even today, she's very soft-spoken. And I don't know if it's nerves. I don't know if it's just because reliving this and even her being emotional throughout her testimony, that, you know, you could tell this was a very difficult process for her having to relive this entire experience, her having to tell the entire world essentially just everything that she had gone through her 11-year on and off relationship with Sean Combs. You know, you could just kind of feel the emotions kind of going through her, something that I don't think necessarily translates that well through the transcript, but hearing through her, she appeared honest, she appeared very truthful, she appeared very credible in my eyes. And so she had said, you know, she just wanted to protect him. And there was something that she had said a lot of times during her testimony, is that she loved him. She thought that this was what love was. And she just essentially never wanted him to get in trouble or anything. And so that's why she kind of protected him as much as she did. She said even after the 2016 hotel incident that he had come to her apartment. She was on the 17th floor of this apartment. And this is an important part because we'll talk more about the testimony of why the 17th floor is so important in this. But, you know, she had said that Diddy tried to get into her apartment. He was banging on her door, yelling at her front door. She even heard from Diddy's, one of his primary assistants, that being Christina Quorum, somebody who's been named in some of the civil lawsuits against him. She said that she had heard from Christina Quorum that day, someone she refers to as KK. And she even spoke with a man named D-Rock who worked security for Sean Combs. She said she even went to D-Rock's house that day, said D-Rock and his wife were there for her, somebody that she even considered a friend. And she said the next time she actually saw Sean Combs was at D-Rock's house. And she had went there to Sean's house, or excuse me, she was at D-Rock's house, and then she had later gone to Sean Combs' house, mainly because she had a movie fitting. Because this is also another important part of this testimony, is that she had a movie premiere very shortly after this entire incident, and for the most part, she said she didn't even want to do this particular freak-off. She mainly did these freak-offs to appease Diddy, to make him happy, but she said she didn't even want to do this particular freak-off because she didn't want to pump herself with a whole bunch of drugs, because she didn't want to be tired or slouched. This was something that she had worked hard for, and she wanted to kind of enjoy this moment for herself, so she didn't want to do this this freak off so it would ruin her premiere. But she went to Sean Combs' house for a movie fitting. Then we in the gallery and the jurors as well too saw an exhibit of Cassie in a gold gown. She had sunglasses on while she's doing this fitting picture, and then she said it was to cover up a black eye that she had had. And so the photo was taken in Diddy's bedroom. She said she even had to cover up the bruises from this beating by using makeup. She had to use a whole bunch of makeup even on her face to cover her black eye. And then we had seen another photo from that red carpet from that premiere where, you know, if you really zoom into it, you could see bruises kind of on her backside. And then we saw another photo, this of Cassie in a green dress. She said this was a dress that she had changed into during this premiere in a popcorn closet of all places at the movie theater. And she had gone to an after party with Diddy. So we saw an exhibit of Diddy on her arm, and they were sitting together at this after party, and you could see a bruise on her leg. She said she had a bruise on her right shin. She also said she had bruises on her thighs. And so we really got an in-depth picture of, one, what had happened at the Intercontinental Hotel from her perspective, but also even the aftermath of just having to kind of cover everything up emotionally, physically, with makeup, and then just go off and act like everything was picture perfect. And so, you know, it was a stark difference from seeing that surveillance video and then seeing a red carpet photo of the two of them together, a photo that we and ourselves even have in house, and just seeing that she appeared happy, but knowing that on her body a bunch of bruises given to her by her boyfriend at the time.
And as all of this is playing out in the courtroom, and you have very emotional testimony from Cassie, you have these images, selfies that she took, like with a busted lip, and I know it can be tough to tell, but how does it seem to be playing with the jury?
Well, from the jury's perspective, from what I could see, because it's really kind of hard to see them at all points, but from where I was sitting today, I will say they've kept pretty stone cold throughout this entire testimony, and that's kind of hard to tell, mainly because, you know, I don't know what their reactions are going on inside their head. Even us in the gallery, you know, for the most part, we're kind of, you know, stone-faced, and then when we get outside of the courtroom, and then we're just like, oh my God, that was a lot. So you really don't know what was kind of going through their head. But I will say, you know, from my perspective, from what I could see, I didn't necessarily see anybody getting emotional or wiping away tears, but you definitely could tell that the jurors were laser focused on Cassie and just the line of questioning. There were some glances at Diddy as well too throughout this testimony, but for the most part you couldn't really tell their emotion, so no idea what's actually going on through their heads while they're listening to all of this.
And today there was a lot of talk about the escorts that Cassie says was involved in these freak-off parties, and there were several names that were brought up. What stood out to you with those names that were brought up in court?
Yes, so we saw a lot of photos, a lot of these escorts. And so, for example, we saw just a bunch of back-to-back exhibits, one from a man named Ash. He was hired through this escort service called Cowboys for Angels through this man named Garen, and this was someone they would fly out to Las Vegas, to Ibiza. There was an escort who she didn't know the second name, but she remembered that he was hired by Cowboys for Angels, saw him in New York. There was an escort named Islander, somebody who was hired mostly in Las Vegas, in Los Angeles. There was a man named Tommy, also hired through Cowboys for Angels. This man was used in Miami. Another escort whose name she couldn't remember, used in Los Angeles. An escort named Skylar, hired also by Cowboys for Angels, used in Los Angeles. There is another escort through Cowboys for Angels named Jake, used in Los Angeles as well too. Couldn't remember another escort's name, also booked through Cowboys for Angels, used in Los Angeles. There was a man named Greg, used in Miami. She didn't remember how he was hired, if he was hired through Craigslist or Backpage. And for the most part, if she could remember, it was through Cowboys for Angels. She said that it was through Cowboys for Angels. Another escort whose name she didn't remember, but remembered him from Freak Offs, an escort named Brian, hired as an escort in New York. He was booked through Craigslist. A man named Ben was hired through Cowboys for Angels as well too, through the man named Garrett. He was booked in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and I say all these different cities mainly because that's how frequent they were. She said she did hundreds of these freak-offs, but there was one particular escort that stood out to me, and that's because he's a familiar face. Not because I know this personally, but because this is somebody we've covered so many times here at Law&Crime, and this was an escort named Jonathan. Obviously, I know Jonathan's last name to be Audie. We saw his photo. I remember his face, and he's a big name. Maybe somebody that people didn't kind of click right off the bat, but I definitely did. This was an escort that definitely stood out to me. Why? Because he did an interrogation after he was in another incident. I don't think it had anything to do with sex crimes or anything like that. It actually had to do with Trump. And when he was interrogated, he was pretty much saying that he was a sex slave for Sean Combs and Cassie, and nobody at the time believed him. Everyone thought that this man was just going on a wild, crazy tangent, that he was just saying things out of his behind, but Cassie confirmed today that he was an escort that they had used in these freak-offs. So it seems like from, Jonathan's perspective that he was telling the truth the entire time, and that, while the claims were made years before this case even went to trial, years before Cassie had even filed her lawsuit, people didn't take him seriously. But Cassie herself confirmed today that Jonathan Audie was definitely an escort that they had used previously, and said that she had seen him several times, specifically in Miami. And so that was definitely a name that was brought up that stood out to me. But this is just some of the escorts that they had booked for these freak-offs, and Cassie said she had booked them again through services like Backpage, through Craigslist, through Cowboys for Angels, and these escorts, essentially, especially the ones that they were more comfortable with, were flown to different places, kind of making this argument, for counts 3 and 5, transportation to engage in prostitution. And so that was one, again, definitely a name that stood out to me. But again, that was just some of the escorts that Cassie and Sean Combs had used during their freak-offs and their freak-off sessions.
Yeah, and to your point, it just seems like there were so many names just today and locations that were already being laid out in this testimony that she's having with the prosecution. What is it like to be in the courtroom? The video from the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, we have all seen it. There's few people, I feel like, in the world that haven't seen that video at this point. But what's it like to be in the room as Sean Combs is there and that video is being played?
So this was a video that, we have seen for a while now, that even being, going back as far as just last year. But then even for jurors, they've been seeing this video essentially every single day since trial, and it's only Wednesday. And so from what I could see just of Diddy's reaction while this video is being played, it seems like this is kind of a point where, anything that had to do with physical abuse, you could kind of tell, and I say kind of like that mainly because, again, I don't want to make assumptions of what's really going on in his mind, but I feel like you could kind of tell this is something that he's ashamed of. Definitely. I think there were points where he kind of, even in between breaks, when the jury's out and stuff like that, he kind of looked at his sons, and he had looked at his associates or friends in the courtroom and just kind of was just like kind of reassuring them that, are they okay? Is he okay? That type of thing. But again, this is a video that he's seen a number of times. And so he didn't have a big emotional reaction to seeing this video played out again in court. But, never know necessarily what is 100% going on in his mind as this video is being played and as all of these allegations and everything is being displayed again out in open court.
And you're one of the few people who have seen Sean Combs since he's been arrested, because he's transported to the courthouse. He's in prison, or in jail, excuse me, for the moment. And just what mannerisms have stood out to you? Because we all know the mogul, we all know Sean Combs and Diddy and all of this, but to see him in this position as a defendant, what mannerisms have stood out to you so far in this trial, just watching how Sean Combs interacts with his attorneys and sits there at the table?
Well, as he's sitting at the table, he looks very differently than when I was covering him during those pretrial hearings, in that he's not in a jumpsuit anymore. He's not in that MDC issue tan jumpsuit. He's in kind of more of a toned down look, even from when he was even prior to when he was arrested. Normally prior to his arrest, we see him in designer clothes, we see him in sunglasses, but now it's completely different. We see him very much toned down in neutral colors. For example, today he was wearing a cream sweater, a white undershirt. He had gray slacks on. The previous day we have seen him in gray sweater, gray slacks, and even before that we were seeing him in a navy sweater and navy slacks. And so for the most part, his mannerisms in the courtroom, he is very much participating in his own defense. He is intently listening to all the testimony that's been given. So far, it's just been Officer Israel Flores as well as Daniel Phillip, one of the escorts, and then Cassie herself. And for the most part, he is just jotting down notes, handing them off to his attorney, asking questions. There was moments that photos were shown inside the courtroom. He's looking at these photos. He's looking at these exhibits. So from the mannerisms I could tell of him, he's very much so participating in his defense. Even during the pretrial hearings, I would notice he would look off into the gallery. He's not doing that this time around. He is very much focused on what is going on with his court cases, again, taking those notes down. But I will say one thing that also stands out to me is that he looks at all the jury members each and every time that they come into this courtroom, which, from my perspective, I can only imagine how intimidating that might feel from theirs. But they don't know Sean Combs to the full extent that maybe we do, because we've been covering this case so often and so much. But, Diddy, for the most part, from the mannerisms I could see of him, he definitely is not taking this very lightly. He is definitely paying attention. He's taking this process very seriously. And it seems that, we can expect a lot with this cross-examination of Cassie, possibly off of some of the notes that Diddy himself had said, because from the defense's perspective, they have been chalking this up as kind of a toxic relationship, a domestic violence issue, that this isn't necessarily sex trafficking or RICO or transportation to engage in prostitution. Obviously, they're defense attorneys, they're defending their client, but for the most part, we kind of know essentially what the defense is, something that Mark Agnifilo had even said, that they're kind of, have had the defense on their shoulders this entire time. They kind of let everybody know their strategy, essentially, and that's discrediting the witnesses, chalking this up to being a domestic violence bat and nothing criminal, and that these freak-offs were consensual, that Cassie wanted to be there, that she didn't necessarily say no. But there were points in her testimony today where it was clear that she had said no to some things, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, let's talk about the freak-offs, because some visual evidence is starting to be presented in the courtroom. What were you able to see today? What was shown?
Yeah, so the freak-offs were definitely a major point and a major sticking point throughout her testimony. Drugs were talked about during these freak-offs because she essentially did enough drugs to disassociate from her testimony today. She did things such as ketamine in the initial part of their relationship. She said she even did opioids. She did Valium and Xanax and GHB and cocaine and marijuana. She drank alcohol. She was taken to sex clubs with Diddy, and essentially she said there was a lot of times where she just felt objectified, that freak-offs were all that she was good for. She had talked about an incident during her 29th birthday where she just wanted to have a dinner with her friends. She wanted to do karaoke, but Diddy wanted to do a freak-off, and she was pulled away from her friends. Some friends that she actually wanted to be with, and she essentially gave up fighting Diddy and did this freak-off, something that she didn't want to do. Blackmail was talked about, sex videos of her, sexually explicit videos of her, freak-off videos of her. He would mention these to her when he was angry, and she said that this was something that he commonly did. She said that there was one time she dated someone else, and Diddy had threatened to put these videos out, and he did this several times with her, because even throughout their relationship together, there were still points that these two were on and off away from each other. But when she would date somebody else, she said that Diddy would threaten to embarrass her and ruin her by putting out these images. She said she feared for her career, for her family, and her family being her mother and her brother. She said it's horrible and it's disgusting, and she said that he would make her feel like an SLUT. She said she didn't even want to be recorded. There was a point talked about through text messages from July 22nd of 2013 where Cassie was saying, please delete any video out of your phone. You have too many people who have access to your stuff. And she said, and Diddy said, I did, and no iCloud. And I'm paraphrasing here. He later on said, taking an Ambien, good night. As far as the videos themselves, she said that in 2014 that she was hosting a party and someone said that they saw a sexually explicit video of her. And so she had called Diddy. He had texted her, I called, pick up. When did he say he saw it? You're going to tell him that this is your life and this is serious. And then said, are you talking to him yet? This being the person who had told her about seeing these videos of her, and said that they had a whole discussion at a restaurant with his security involved. And it was pretty much the security's role in this whole scenario was to intimidate these people about why they were talking about the sexually explicit video. And she said that essentially everyone at this meetup was scared and confused about it. She said that Diddy's bodyguard, Uncle Paulie, was there. Her former manager, James Cruz, was there, someone who had worked with Diddy. She had talked about the recoveries of these freak-offs. But I will say, there was a big discussion yesterday just about whether or not these videos or still images would be shown to the gallery, to the general public. So there was a whole issue just yesterday about whether or not we being the public and we being the press that was inside that courtroom and those in the gallery would be able to see these images of the freak-offs, whether they were still images or video images. The judge essentially ruled not to show them to the public, to the gallery, and something that will be under seal whenever they release all these exhibits. And it's mainly because that they didn't want to re-victimize the victims. And so from what the discussion was today, these images were still shown in court. However, they kind of made a big adjustment to doing that, and that, when the jury was dismissed, they kind of turned the cameras, the computer monitors where these jurors see these exhibits, see these photographs, they turned them a little bit in, mainly so nobody could kind of peek at them through the gallery. Even for the attorneys themselves on both sides, they were given a binder of these images instead of showing them on their computer screens, just so that way nobody could see them. But we got a description of what these photographs looked like just through Cassie's testimony. And so she was asked, do you recognize this individual? And she said that she did. It was an exhibit of the escort Jules, who was in that hotel room during the Intercontinental Hotel incidents, an escort that they had frequently used during freak-offs. And it was a photo from a video of a freak-off. And then Cassie had said that she gave these images over to the government from broken devices that she had, and those included iPads, computers, former phones that she had used but she had kept. And then I could see, even just from sitting in the gallery, Diddy looking at these images. He was looking over Ana Maria Esteveo's shoulders just to kind of take a peek at these images. I couldn't tell much of a reaction that he had just kind of sitting from where I was sitting after he saw these photos. But then there was another photo of Cassie and an escort named Dave in a freak-off. There was another photo of Cassie and an escort named Greg in a freak-off. There was another photo of Cassie on the couch. She had linens on her. The linens were on the floor. She was in high heels. She had water next to her, and she had said that she had used water often during these freak-offs just because of how long these freak-offs were, how dehydrated she would get, mainly from the drug use, that she had to have water near her just to stay hydrated through this. There was another photo shown with Cassie with oil all over her. There were candles around her. There were lube tops around her, and those were just kind of the vivid descriptions that we had seen through her testimony. And again, we didn't see these images ourselves. They're going to be kept under seal, so only the jury and the respective parties are going to be able to see those. But those were just some of the images that they had brought up today as far as the freak-offs go.
Elizabeth, we talked about Cassie's husband being in the courtroom. There's another person who was a partner of Cassie once, who also came up today. That's a name that a lot of people know, and that's the rapper Kid Cudi. Why did his name come up? How does that factor into this?
Well, he was referred to as Scott Mescudi in court today, and Cassie even referred to him as Scott throughout her testimony. And so Kid Cudi was something that we had known about for a while, right? He was a name that was brought up in Cassie's civil lawsuit against Diddy that she filed in 2023, or towards the end of 2023, that was settled within a day of her filing, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in just a second. But Kid Cudi was brought up today in testimony, mainly because there was a big issue surrounding just the conflicts that Kid Cudi had with Diddy, and the conflicts being that Diddy allegedly sent people to blow up his car. And so Cassie was testifying that they being Kid Cudi and Cassie, dated in 2011. They first started off working together, and they were just friends before they actually started dating. But then when Diddy found out, he actually found out during a freak-off, which was a very surprising part of today's testimony. He said that he was going through her phone and saw an email between Cassie and one of Diddy's staff members named Capricorn Clark. This email was essentially about Cassie getting a toiletry bag. But when Diddy found out about her dating Kid Cudi, she had said that Diddy put a bottle, a wine bottle opener in his finger. So just picture that imagery. You have a kind of a swirly, pointy tip. It's in between. You can kind of see the picture that's kind of painted there. And she had said that he lunged at her, and she just left this freak off. And that was one of the few times she was actually able to leave these freak offs, because for the most part, Diddy had made her stay, according to her. But she said after she had left this freak off, she called Kid Cudi from a burner phone. He had picked her up, and she had this burner phone just so that way Diddy wouldn't even find out that she was speaking to Kid Cudi in a romantic way, or even dating him. And so she said that Diddy's staff member Capricorn Clark did know about their relationship. And after Cassie met with Capricorn Clark, she went to Diddy's house, and Diddy threatened to release freak-off videos of her, and even threatened Kid Cudi. She said at this point that Diddy even kicked her in the back after that, and then we saw a photo of bruises just on her back from this kick that he had did, according to her. She said after leaving and after this kick to the back, she just wanted to get her stuff from a hotel room, and said that when she returned back to the hotel room that it was completely destroyed. She said that there was even unflushed fecal matter, if you know what I'm talking about, inside the toilet. She said it was essentially just a mess inside that hotel room. And then she had sent an email actually following up to Cassie's mother. It was CC'd on this email, as well as Capricorn Clark, somebody that had worked for Diddy at around this time frame. So this was December 23rd of 2011, and if you kind of think about that time frame, that's around the holiday times. And she had sent this saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, threats have been made to me that he'll release 2 explicit videos of me. and she had said that threats were made to hurt her as well as Kid Cudi, and that Diddy wouldn't do it himself because he'd be out of the country, kind of insinuating that he had other people to carry out this alleged crime instead. And she said when she went back home, she had shown her mom these bruises on her legs, on her back, and we had seen again these photos through exhibits, and this was actually the first time that she had told her mother about the physical abuse she endured throughout her relationship. She didn't necessarily go into full detail about everything that she was enduring throughout her relationship with Diddy, because she said that she was embarrassed to even kind of speak about these freak-offs. But she said that Kid Cudi actually met her in Connecticut and stayed with her around 3 or 4 days around this time frame, and she actually broke it off with Kid Cudi during this time period, mainly because she was nervous just about the threats made by Sean Combs, according to her, to Kid Cudi and herself, and was essentially saying that, you know, she broke things off, then nobody would get hurt. Nothing bad would happen to anybody. Even after this time frame where she broke things off with Kid Cudi, she had went to Arizona to visit Sean Combs, something that she didn't even tell her family about because she thought it would disappoint them. And then even they had a whole meeting, they being Kid Cudi, Diddy, and Cassie herself. They all met together back at Soho House, back in Los Angeles. And Kid Cudi asked about his car, and Diddy said, "What car?" And so essentially there was just there was a meeting that had happened. Diddy had essentially said, "What car?" kind of alluding to the fact that he had nothing to do with it, even though from Cassie's point of view and even from the text messages and email that we saw, that there were threats that were made, especially after Diddy had found out about their relationship. And so Kid Cudi was a big focal point, especially during the afternoon, especially during that afternoon portion of her testimony, where again we were seeing exhibits of physical abuse, we were seeing emails during this point, we were seeing text messages, and so that was a lot, or that took out a good chunk of today's testimony that kind of went on, maybe I would say maybe an hour or so.
And it seemed like from the updates we were getting on the outside that it was with each anecdote that she was giving, there was a picture that was provided in many cases, whether she had a busted lip or she had a black eye, just kind of detailing the physical abuse that she says that she went through in this relationship. We did learn a little bit about the breakup and how this relationship came to an end. What can you tell us about that?
Yep, and so the breakup, as we know, occurred around 2018, so just a few years ago, honestly. And so around this time, Cassie was saying pretty much that she was abusing drugs during this time frame. She even sought out professional help around 5 or 6 different times while she was in her relationship with Diddy. And so she had essentially said the breakup was initially initiated when she said from her perspective that she had known that Diddy was seeing somebody else throughout the duration of her relationship, and she had said to Diddy that, you know, if I see that you're with this girl again, or if you guys are going to continue doing this, I'm done. And she ended up actually seeing a photo of this unnamed woman and Diddy together, and so she said she was done with the relationship. And even around that time frame, so after she was done with the relationship, she even saw Diddy afterwards. After that, she said that they had a closure dinner around sometime in 2018, and by this time she was dating someone else. She was dating Alex Fine, somebody who is her now husband. And then I'm mentioning this specific dinner because she had said at the first, you know, Diddy was nice during this dinner. They were having a good time. And then when they got back to her place, he had raped her in the living room, according to her testimony today. She said that she was crying throughout this experience. She said she was saying no. She said that Diddy's eyes essentially went black, and it was like that he wasn't even there during this, and that he continued to rape her even though she was crying, even though she said no, but still admits that the two were intimate again together even after this alleged rape in 2018. She said that, you know, when she was asked, why did you continue seeing Sean Combs in a sexual manner after this rape, this alleged rape, I need to say, she said that she couldn't just turn her feelings off even after the rape. She said she still had a good vision of who Diddy was as a person, said she couldn't even really hate him. She said that she even stayed in touch with everybody, including, you know, his assistants and security for a number of times. But then, you know, post-breakup, her and Diddy would still check in with one another for a period of time. up until around 2019. And I bring up 2019 because Diddy had sent a message to Cassie, a text message to her saying, I'll pull up and handle it face to face. No threats and facts that you'll not be threatening me. If I was you, I'd get me my money. You have too many iPads full of skeletons. And essentially what Cassie was saying from this particular message was that Diddy was requesting a refund from her for Alex physically training her because, this is something that we had known for a while now, that Diddy had hired Alex Fine to train Cassie during this time. And essentially he just wanted his money back for that because they were dating around this time frame. Now the two are married. They have, almost 3 beautiful children together. And then Cassie responded, do you want me to tell the truth? Because it's deeper than iPads. And so you could tell just by listening to this testimony that this pain goes back years, at least to 2019, according to this text messages, where, even there was another text message, this one from 2017, where Cassie sent to Diddy, I told you, I think this is all I'm used for. And this she was referring to with freak-offs. She said, I didn't leave you. I saved you from beating me up. Now let's fast forward to March of 2023. So just a couple of years ago, but think about that time frame. That was a couple months before her lawsuit, the lawsuit that she had filed against Sean Combs. And I'll get there in a second. But during this time frame in March of 2023, she had went to rehab for trauma therapy and for drug use. And she said, and this is where she started getting pretty emotional, is that she didn't want to be alive at that point. And that's a pretty interesting statement for her to make because at this time, us in the public, we had thought she had healed at that point. She was now married to Alex Fine. She already had children at this point, but for her to get on the stand today and say she didn't even want to be alive anymore, it was really gut-wrenching to hear. She said that around this time frame, she was even shooting a music video with an artist. This artist was unnamed. She said that she had really bad flashbacks around this time frame, and to the point where she wanted to unalive herself. She had actually run into traffic, and her husband Alex had to go and get her. And so it was just a very tough point, and it was a pretty hard testimony to listen to because she is visibly upset. She is crying on the witness stand at this point, but she's keeping her composure together as best as she could. Now, after this suicide attempt, then they started talking about the memoir, and this was something that the defense says was essentially their argument that these allegations aren't real, that she had just wanted money. She was doing this for the rights of her book, but she had said that she had wrote down this book mainly as trauma therapy for herself, and she said that this therapy for herself was in the form of the book. She said her mom actually helped her with it as far as coming up with chapters, and the reason that she even wanted to write this book was so that Diddy specifically could read it, so he could understand what he had done to her throughout the duration of their relationship, because she didn't think that he'd ever realized necessarily what he had done to her and just how excruciating everything that she had went through from her perspective actually was to her. She said that she had carried the shame of doing these freak-offs for years at a time. And she said she did everything for Diddy, but, she felt horrible about herself, that she felt numb because she chose to participate in this. And so this is when they get more into the weeds of the memoir, where she had actually reached out to Diddy once again through the lawyer about the book. She even reached out to Christina Coram, one of Diddy's top assistants, someone she refers to as KK, and asked if Diddy had read the book. But Christina Coram's response, according to Cassie, was that no one took it seriously. And so she said she wanted to be compensated for her time and her pain. And this is what's interesting, Chris, is she said for the rights to her book, she just threw out a number there. She said she threw out a number of $30 million. And she said that was a number she just chose randomly because it was enough to essentially scare Diddy. That is her motivation by putting that number figure down, which is a lot of money. I mean, $30 million, that is a lot of money. That would grab my attention. It still grabs my attention. And I'm nowhere near any of that type of money in my bank account, that's for sure. But she said she didn't receive money for the book rights. However, when it came to the lawsuit, She did say this, and I think this is very big. There was always a discussion about how much she settled her lawsuit for, and she confirmed today it was for $20 million. So no, it wasn't that $30 million figure that, she had used to essentially get Sean Combs' attention, but because of just how these allegations were and just even the reaction of when she had filed her lawsuit, you can understand why, from Diddy's perspective at the time, why he settled within the matter of 24 hours, and just look at where we are today just because of that one lawsuit. And so, she had said in court today she had no other pending lawsuits with Sean or Sean Combs or any of his staff members. But she was asked, why are you testifying today? And she said, still tearfully at this point, I can't carry this anymore. The shame and the guilt. What's right is right. What's wrong is wrong. I'm here to do the right thing. She was asked, in the last bit of moments of her questioning, how many freak-offs did you do? And she said hundreds. But then she said, how many freak-offs did you do after the breakup? And she said none. So, it was very hard testimony to listen to. I really, just my perspective, just as a human being, I really kind of felt for her during this testimony. I think a lot of people, for the most part, get caught up in just, the baby oil and just things that to them they perceive as funny and entertainment. But from her perspective, something that, again, doesn't translate the best in these transcripts where we just see words, she was very emotional just about recalling this excruciating time in her life. But thankfully, she came out on top of this, and this is just me speaking candidly. She has the support of her mother. She has the support of her brother and family, as well as her husband and, of course, her children. And, she is within the third trimester of her pregnancy as well, too. So when she has baby number 3, it seems that, after everything that she's been through, that she is able to kind of just leave this in the past. We don't know what cross-examination is going to look like, right? That is supposed to begin tomorrow morning, and we kind of holding our breath a little bit because we don't know what to expect. Will they be aggressive with her? Will they be delicate with her? Because who wants to ask really assertive, really hard questions to someone who is visibly pregnant? How could that come across, especially to jurors, where the defense doesn't want to seem like they're bullying her? So a lot of us are very much anticipating what could come out of cross, how they'll be able to kind of poke holes into her testimony or poke holes into her credibility as something that, it seems like they're going to be going forward as far as their defense strategy goes. But it's been a lot of her testimony within these last 2 days, a lot of things that have been divulged with this testimony. And so we're only kind of getting to the start of it, really, because now we still have the whole entire cross to go into. And so that is going to take, assuming that she even gets off the stand by the end of this week, her testimony can definitely carry all the way to Friday for sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long the defense takes. And to your point, what approach do they take? Because based off everything we're hearing, everything that you're telling us, this was such emotional, raw, authentic, it seems, testimony that she's given to this point. How do you handle that in a way where, if you're a defense attorney, do you want to go scorched earth on somebody and really make the jury mad if they do feel for her? We'll see how it all plays out. I know we're battling the weather elements there outside the courthouse in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan. Law&Crime's Elizabeth Millner, great job covering this case as you will continue on, as this case continues on. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us for Sidebar. Be sure to subscribe on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Chris Stewart, filling in for Jesse Weber. We'll see you next time.